Complete the table of solutions to the equation 3x plus 5y equals 15. So I'm going to start with number 2 and number 5, and then you can complete the rest on your own. The negative 5 goes into the x position, and we are asked to determine what the y value is. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. We will add 15 to both sides, which gives us 5y equals 30. And then divide both sides by 5, which gives us y equals 6. For this next one, this is the y value, so we have 3x plus 5 times negative 3/5 equals 15. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15, and negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. Then we will add 3 to both sides, which gives us 3x equals 18. And if we divide both sides by 3, that gives us x equals 6. Plug in the remaining values into the correct variable and solve for the other variable. What do you notice about these two equations? Well, this one has a 0 for the x term, and this one has a 0 for the y term. So there are a few special cases of these equations that we're going to look at today. So here we have the equation 0x plus y equals 5. So if we plug in a negative 8 in the x position, 0 times negative 8 is just 0, and 0 plus 5, or 0 plus y equals 5, means that y has to be 5. For the next one, if we put in negative 4, 0 times negative 4 is 0, so we still get y equals 5. We can continue this pattern. If I put in a 0 in the x position, 0 times 0 is 0. So then y still is 5. If I put in 4, 0 times 4 is 0, so y is still 5. And if I plug in 8, 0 times 8 is 0, so I still get y equals 5. So the solution to these equations comes in the form of coordinates, like negative 8, 5, negative 4, 5, 0, 5, 4, 5, and 8, 5. And it says graph the ordered pair from part A. So like I said, negative 8, 5, negative 4, 5, 0, 5, 4, 5, and 8, 5. Which we discussed it was linear, so we can connect them. In the previous lessons, we talked about how linear equations, we can continue to fill in those spaces in between, and it's going to continue to follow this pattern, but we won't have time to graph an infinite number of points, so we draw this line indicating the trend that the line is following, or that the points are following. So in the case where the x term was 0, we had a horizontal line. Let's look at what happens when the y term has a 0. 0 times -8 is 0. So in order to get x plus 0 to equal 2, that would be 2. And then we can continue. If I put in 0 times -4, that is 0. So I still get x equals 2. If I put in a 0, 0 times 0 is 0. So I get x equals 2. If I put in a positive 4, 0 times 4 is 0. So I'll still get x equals 2. And if I put in an 8 in the y spot, 0 times 8 is 0. So I still get x equals 2. In the next part, I'm going to graph the points 2, -8, 2, -4, 2, 0, 2, 4, and 2, 8. So we're going to go 2, -8, 2, -4, 2, 0, 2, 4, and 2, 8. So in the case where the y had a 0 term, we ended up with a vertical line. Oh. So this says y equals 3. So we're going to put a point where y is 3. And I said if the 0x, that would be a horizontal line. So that means it doesn't matter what x is, y is always going to be 3. Every single time. There's no x term, so it's creating a horizontal line. Here, we're going to go to where x is -8. So on the x-axis, we're going to -8. And it doesn't matter what y is, anywhere along there, we're going to get -8. And so if there's no y term, we get a vertical line. And that vertical line shows up at the place where x is -8. Here, x is 7. So anytime we're going to go over to 7 and then up or down, because the x value is always going to be 7. Here, y is -4, so we're going y-axis to -4, and it's always going to be -4, no matter what the x value is. X is 0. There's no y term, it's a 0 in the y term. So x is always going to be 0, which creates a vertical line. Then this one, there's no x term. It would be like 0x plus y equals 0. So this one would create a horizontal line because y always has to be 0 no matter what x value you put in. Which equation or which graph represents the equation 2x equals 7? Well, if we divided by 2, that would give us x equals 3.5. So we know it's not going to be at 7, or this one is at 7. It's either going to be B or D. When there was no y term, x is always 3.5. So that is this one where it doesn't matter what the y values are going up and down the y-axis, the x always has to go over to 3.5. For problems 10 and 11, graph the equation. Again, we'll divide by -3 here to get y equals 9 divided by -3 is -3. So on our y-axis, we're going to put a point at -3. We could go over to 2, but the y value still has to be -3. We could go back to -10, but the y value still is going to come out to -3. So this is creating that horizontal line at y equals -3. For this one, we'll divide both sides by 4. 4 fits into 10 2 times, with 2 left over, which can be reduced to 2.5. So we're going over to 2.5 on the x-axis. And then it doesn't matter what the y values are, we're always going to go over 2.5 for the x value. So this is creating that vertical line at 2.5. Please make sure your warm-up is finished and that your workbook is filled in for this lesson with the horizontal and vertical number lines. It might also be helpful to make a note of when the lines are horizontal and when they are vertical.